From the kitchen of the cabin, a look at the games that made us who we are in Ben and Steve's Advent Calendar.
It's December 10th, day 10 of Ben and Steve's holiday board game Advent
I'm
Calendar.
getting on the internet now. I'm gonna get a fucking plane. I'm gonna get on the plane. I'm gonna come over there. I'm going to come over... Yeah, it's very difficult. Ben and Steve's board game advent calendars. It's very fucking difficult. I'm going to knife the fucking shit out of you if you don't fucking get them. You're being willful.
Ben and Steve's board game advent holiday calendar.
Look, just fucking get on with it. Get on with it. You depress me. Do you know how long I spent coming up with the title for this series, this short series? Do you know how long I spent?
Did you, make it up in the first episode on the fly?
No.
Did Tim make it up himself in the promo?
No, I made it up when I wrote the email to Tim to ask him to do a picture. I made it up as I was writing the email. It took me the time it took to type it.
Stream of consciousness, as you always do.
That's my big thing. Stream of consciousness. The consciousness streams down the inside of my leg.
More than anyone else, I think that you live in the present. I mean, you certainly don't think about the future, and I believe you've forgotten.
No, why would I? Why would I think about the future?
So
it's a horrible place.
Day 10, and we have the 10th door, little tiny door of our advent calendar to open, Ben. And what's behind that door? Is it a little game, or is it a big game in a little box?
It is So, I remember this was the first board game fad that I became aware of, because this came out, I think, 2012, and this was the first, and I still think to this day, the best micro game out there. And I remember watching a review of this, and this is Love Letter, by the way. I remember watching a review of it thinking, why the hell why the hell am I going to be into something that's about delivering love letters to a princess? This makes no bloody sense. I'm into goth music and that, and into serious, depressing films and books and that. Why am I into this? I'm not a Jane Austen nerd or anything. But everybody was saying this game is so good. And I thought, well, it's fucking £9. Why not? I'll just buy it. And if it's crap, it's crap, And again, it's another one of those games. I played it and I just went, this is brilliant. This is absolutely fantastic. And this is, I think, Seiji Kanai's best game, at least from the games I've played by him. And this is the best micro game out there. And I played it recently-ish, a few months. Sorry?
You said this more than once, micro game. I mean, what is a micro game? What makes a micro game? And is it only because larger games eventually appeared in the world that we started to classify some smaller games as micro games in comparison?
No, it's called a micro game because it's 18 cards. This is a game that is built, these are mechanisms built around almost nothing, willfully few components. And it seemed at the time, very in keeping with Japan, right? Real estate in Tokyo is crazily expensive. Everyone lives lives on top of each other. You don't have space for shelves and shelves of board games. So they culturally work around it, and they produce these beautifully fashioned little gems out of almost nothing. And Love Letter really spoke to that. Now, I don't know if I'm indulging in a bit of Orientalism here, but that's at the time was kind of the narrative, and it made a lot of sense. And then you play it and you go, oh, this is brilliant. And it does that thing that little card games do, which is you play it once and you want to play it again, and you can spend a game of Love Letter maybe takes 15, 20 minutes, but you can play it for 3 hours and it's still fantastic. You know what I mean?
So what other micro games would you compare it to? What other games fit snugly into this genre?
Well, there was loads that came out around that time, and I remember almost none of them, in fact. There was Lost Legacy, which was Seiji Kanai's follow-up to Love Letter, and it was fine, but not as good. And now you see games aren't being marketed as micro games anymore, but I think something like Land, Air and Sea, for instance, I think is a micro game, and it's building on that micro game tradition, and it's great. And so for a while, sort of like every game was a micro game. But it in the same way, you had a time when there was just loads of legacy games, or everything was a worker placement game, and what's happened is it's sort of...
Would you say like Cartographers is a micro game?
No, absolutely not. No. There's loads of cards. There's loads of cards and components. I mean, it's not a micro game. Micro games are like 18 cards, 12, 18 card decks. And Love Letters had all of these...
Tussie Mussy.
Yeah, carry on. Tussie Mussy's a micro game, absolutely. Yeah.
They're very easy to pile up. I mean, have you heard of Tsundoku, the Japanese habit of piling up books that you probably haven't read? Just like piles, like hoarding books, essentially. Tsundoku. I think there must be a board game equivalent of Tsundoku that you and I both suffer from.
Yeah, and yeah. And I think... So I'm not a board game designer, and I don't think in that way. But sometimes you see something and you go, this is pure. This is very clever. And I have a real kind of admiration for people who make something out of nothing. And I think Love Letter falls into that. Now, you've played Love Letter, right?
Yeah, it's great.
And why is it good, would you say? If you were forced to put your finger on
it. Why is Love Letter so good? It's just like, I mean, I love card games. It's quick. It's tense. It is somehow thematic, although I don't know how much it matters that it's thematic. I think what it does is that it somehow allows you to leverage and enjoy your own cleverness. I think that's what it is. It makes you feel clever when you play it, and you play it well, and it works out for you. You know what I mean?
And also, it's got great interaction, right? So I think when a game has an obvious gimmick like Love Letter does, which is, so few cards and you get a whole game of it. So few of them actually feel like real games. Love Letter feels like a real game. It feels like you're actually coming out of it with something at the end. There's a genuine feeling of victory, and I think that's really great. And the way the powers bounce off each other, and the way you're able to sort of anticipate other players' moves. And it's that thing we were talking about in Condottiere, right, a few days ago, that you think you've got it all together, and then someone just whips the rug out from under you and you sprawl on your ass. That's what Love Letter offers, and I think that's a wonderful aspect of it.
Is there a distinction between a micro game and a filler game?
So a filler game is about the length of time it takes to play. A micro game is componentry, how few components a game has, and it's usually cards. I think Love Letter is both categories. It's a filler and a micro game.
Okay, so you think there are micro games that happen to take a long time to play despite having few components?
I've yet to play one, if I'm honest. Most micro games tend to be short. And people listening to this, you can get on the old Twitters and that and tell us. But micro games tend to be short games. The thing that stops Love Letter being a filler is that it's so great that you end up playing it for 3 hours,
Like round after round.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it's one of those things, it was super fashionable at one time. You see these games that are massively groundbreaking, and of course they go out of fashion and people start to talk badly about them. Love Letter was like this. Codenames, which I think is maybe the most significant game of the last 10 years, is like this. Everyone adored it when it first came out, and now people talk about, oh, it's crap, I want to play this, is better than Codenames. And it's just because things go in and out of fashion. And, it was a few months ago I played Love Letter again, and I just went, oh no, this is great. This is great. And there's going to come a time, right? There's going to come a time where, what's that Oink game at the moment that's super popular?
Scout.
Scout, there's going to come a time where, in a few years, we're going to play Scout and go, oh no, this is great. This is why we really liked it back in those times. And of the last 10 days, I think a theme that has really run through the last 10 days is these are games I really want to play again, games I really want to get to the table again. And Love Letter's fantastic.
Yeah, I think you have good taste as well. Another game that you always recommended and that you're completely right about is Libertalia. And I almost feel like it is in kind of the same milieu as Love Letter now. Not in an obvious way, because it's a large box, but there isn't actually much there component-wise. Like, you could imagine it being smaller than it is, and it takes maybe a bit longer, but I think they're sort of close in that way, if you see what I mean.
I think it's and I think just on Libertalia briefly, I think Libertalia is going to kind of sink.
No, never.
I think it's going to sink this current printing, and it's a shame. And I think it's because Libertalia is a game that implies dirty, stinky pirates, and it's got this kid's art, and that's a real shame. It's a real shame that there seems to be a desire on the part of sort of a lot of board game publishers to make things sort of kid friendly and a bit sort of safe. And Love Letter,
the micro games like lend themselves to that treatment simply because the heavier games are going to appeal mostly to like hardcore adult hobbyists, maybe.
Sure, I guess maybe the thematic idea is that you want it to be as broad as possible. And I the thing is, as I say, theme doesn't really matter. Games are mechanical art forms, and I think Love Letter is so solid. Its mechanics are so perfectly wrought. It is a real tour de force, even though it's a tiny game.
Yeah, and you're often defending these smaller games. Like Skull King is another one that comes to mind, that you put them right up there against the biggest, heaviest, weightiest games, and you say like you can legitimately compare them, and a great game is a great game, whether it's a micro game or a macro game, right?
I think there's so much snobbery in games, right? And it's got to be a super heavy Euro or a 3-week long war game for it to be worthy. But, no thanks is as good a game as any of those. Brilliant crystalline design, 2 or 3 ideas perfectly put together is as good as a big expansive game that takes weeks to play. And Love Letter is proof positive of that.
Well, I think I've become more and more persuaded of the merits of this argument over time, possibly by exposure to you, because I don't know, I see it in the experience that I have of these games, and I don't know that it matters what size box the experience comes out of.
And is that your way of telling me that you love me?
Well, not exactly. I do think that you've had a kind of outsized impact on my own opinions about games and which games I should want to play. But, I have to hand it to you. You're very good at curating, You're very good at, what? I think that you want to play games that are fun, and so do I, but I'm not always immediately attracted to the games that are simply fun. I get pulled in by some of the hype around heavy games and complicated games, and it's not like you're against them, but you are looking for a different kind of experience that in the end I actually appreciate more than some of these weightier affairs. Anyway, this brings me to my last question, since we're talking about micro games. I'm just curious, are you drawn to micro games in particular because you have a micro penis?
Don't know what you're talking about.
Thank you for listening to this show and indulging our overweening nostalgia. If you would like to support the show, you can do that by going to patreon.com/5G4D. And we both wish you a very, Merry Christmas.